Okay, so today we're going to tackle something that's both fascinating and kind of disturbing, a really puzzling case from way back in 1919 England, the Green Bicycle case, which involves the death of a young woman named Bella Wright.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it is. And the material you sent over for this was just amazing. So much to unpack here. So let's just dive right in and see if we can, pull out the key facts and maybe even come up with some answers to those questions that still kind of linger about this whole thing.
Absolutely. This is one of those cases that even after more than 100 years, it still leaves you wondering what really happened.
Right. Exactly. So let's start with Bella Wright herself. She was only 21 years old, worked in a rubber factory, and was engaged to be married. Seemed like she had her whole life ahead of her.
Yeah, and from what I read, she was a pretty familiar sight, cycling around her village, Little
Yeah.
Stretton, just a part of the community, it seems.
And then there's Ronald Light, who was with her on that day. He was 33, a mathematics teacher.
Hmm.
But his background, it's a little bit complicated, to say the least.
Oh, yeah, definitely. More than a little.
His father was a successful civil engineer, so, pretty well-off family. But Ronald had been expelled from school for indecent behavior.
Interesting.
And that wasn't all. He was fired from several jobs, suspected of arson in one case, and more indecency issues cropped up too. And then during World War I, he was court-martialed.
Wow, so a military trial. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, it suggests there was something significant going on there.
Huh.
And on top of all that, he suffered from shell shock, which is what they called PTSD back then.
Sure.
So, quite a bit of baggage there.
It really makes you wonder how all of that, his past, his behavior, how it might have colored people's perceptions of him once Bella's death became public knowledge.
Right. Did it make him seem more suspicious to people, maybe? Or did it just, add to the overall tragedy of this situation?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something to think about.
For sure. So let's fast forward to that fateful day. July 5th, 1919. Bella was riding her bike to visit her uncle in a village called Galby. And it seems she ran into Ronald Light along the way.
Just a chance encounter.
It seems that way. According to what Light said later, Bella had a little problem with her bike, a loose freewheel, and she asked him if he had a spanner to fix it.
Did he?
He didn't, but he offered to help anyway. And when he found out they were both going towards Galby, he suggested they ride together. Bella agreed, and there were actually a few people who saw them cycling together.
So a seemingly ordinary start to a very, very dark turn of events.
Sadly, about half an hour after Bella and Light left her uncle's place, a farmer found her body on Gartree Road. At first, everyone just assumed it was a bike accident. Her face was pretty messed up with gouge marks like she'd fallen.
That makes sense. You'd think it was an accident with those injuries.
Exactly. But then the next morning, during a closer examination, they found a bullet wound under her left eye. And that changed everything.
Wow. So it went from a tragic accident to a potential murder.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how they missed that bullet wound in the first place, right?
It does. It just goes to show how important it is to be thorough and how easily assumptions can be made, especially in those early stages of an investigation.
Absolutely. So with a gunshot wound, now part of the story, the question became how was she shot and with what weapon? And that's where the green bicycle comes in. This is the bike that was seen with Bella, and it belonged to Ronald Light. And it's pretty distinctive green with a coaster brake. Not something you saw every day.
Right. So pretty easy to remember and describe.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. After Bella's death, there were all these appeals in the newspapers asking for information about the man seen with her on the green bicycle. But Light, he didn't come forward.
Oh, really?
Instead, he tried to hide the bike. He took it apart and threw most of the pieces into the river Soar. A laborer actually saw him doing it.
So he was actively trying to get rid of evidence? That's suspicious.
Very suspicious. And, in legal terms, that kind of behavior can be seen as evidence of a guilty mind. It doesn't prove he committed the crime, but it suggests he knew the bike could connect him to Bella, and he wanted to get rid of that connection.
Right. It makes you wonder why he didn't just get rid of all of it, though, if he was so worried about being linked to the crime.
That's a good question. He kept the rear wheel, which had that unique coaster brake. Maybe he didn't realize how identifiable that one part was.
Possibly. And it was a costly mistake because that's what ultimately led them right back to him.
Exactly. Months later, a barge was going down the River Soar, and its tow rope snagged the bike frame. It was pulled out of the water, and even though Light had tried to file off the serial numbers and the manufacturer's mark, there was still a faint serial number left on the front fork.
Wow, talk about attention to detail. That's some serious detective work.
Yeah, the investigators, they really went above and beyond. They were able to trace that faint number back to Light. He'd bought the bike 9 years earlier.
So they had their man, at least the man who owned the bike.
Exactly. But it's Light's actions after the murder that really make this case so intriguing. It wasn't just the bike. He ignored all the public appeals for information, and when the police finally questioned him, he lied. He said he didn't know Bella and he didn't even own a green bicycle.
Oh, wow. So not only did he try to hide evidence, he straight up lied to the police.
He did. Later on, he changed his story. He admitted to being with Bella, but said they parted ways before she was shot. He claimed he only found out about her death from the newspaper and that he panicked because he had been seen with her.
I mean, I can understand panicking after learning someone you were with was murdered, but his actions go way beyond a normal panicked response.
Right, hiding the bike, the lies. It all suggests he was trying to cover something up.
For sure. It just doesn't look good for him, does it?
Not really. And it gets worse. Remember those bike parts he threw in the canal? Well, he also found a pistol holster that had been issued to him and a dozen live .455 caliber bullets.
Hold on. The same caliber as the bullet that killed Bella?
The exact same caliber.
Okay, now that's pretty damning evidence.
It is. It directly links him to the type of weapon used, even though they never found the actual revolver.
Right. So he had the opportunity, but no clear motive as to why he would do something like that.
Exactly. Which brings us to the trial. It took place at Leicester Castle, and Light pleaded not guilty. He had a very good lawyer, Sir Edward Marshall Hall, one of the best in the country.
I've heard of him. He was known for getting people off even in seemingly impossible cases.
He was. The prosecution's case was built around the idea that Light ambushed Bella after she left him to go home a different way. They had a lot of circumstantial evidence and the eyewitness accounts of them together, Light's lies, and of course getting rid of the bike holster and bullets.
It's a compelling narrative, but without a clear motive, it does make you wonder.
And that's exactly what Light's defense focused on, Sir Edward Marshall Hall. He really hammered home that there was no apparent reason for Light to kill Bella.
Yeah.
And admitted to being with her and to lying, but he insisted he didn't kill her.
So it became a case of his word against the circumstantial evidence.
Pretty much. There was also some interesting testimony from two young girls who said that earlier on the day of the murder, a man who looked like Light had acted inappropriately towards them while they were cycling near where Bella's body was found.
So potentially more bad behavior from Light.
But the judge told the jury to disregard that testimony. So it wasn't considered reliable or relevant to the case.
That's interesting. I wonder why the judge made that decision.
We can only speculate, but it does show how a judge can influence what the jury focuses on.
Right. And in this case, it seems like the judge wanted them to focus on the events directly related to Bella's death.
Right. Now remember those bullets they found. Light claimed that he'd lost his service revolver during the war in France.
So if he didn't have the gun, then he couldn't have shot Bella.
That was his argument. And without the murder weapon, the prosecution couldn't definitively prove he did it.
It makes sense. You need that smoking gun, so to speak, to really seal the deal.
And then there was the testimony from the ballistics expert. He said that the bullet that killed Bella might have ricocheted before hitting her, and it could have come from a rifle, not a revolver. This raised the possibility that it was a stray bullet fired by someone else entirely.
Oh, wow. So now there's reasonable doubt about whether Light even fired the fatal shot.
Exactly. The defense also pointed out that the entry wound on Bella wasn't really consistent with a close-range shot from a service revolver.
So more uncertainty, more questions.
After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with a verdict: not guilty.
Not guilty. Wow. After all that evidence, they still found him not guilty.
They did. And get this, when the verdict was announced, the people in the courtroom, they cheered.
Really? So the public was on his side?
It seems that way. Maybe they weren't convinced by the circumstantial evidence, or maybe they felt sympathy for Light, given his past and the lack of a clear motive.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely a fascinating detail.
So what happened to everyone after the trial? Well, Bella Wright was buried a few days later. Hundreds of people attended her funeral. Such a sad ending for her.
It is a young life cut short in such a tragic way.
As for Ronald Light, he went back to live with his mother in Leicester. He actually used a fake name for a while, even got fined for using it at a hotel.
So he was trying to hide his identity even after being acquitted. That's strange.
He eventually got remarried in 1934 and lived a long life. He died in 1975 at the age of 89. But here's another interesting thing. His stepdaughter, she didn't even know about the green bicycle case until after he died.
He kept it a secret from her all those years. It makes you wonder what was going through his mind all that time. Did he feel guilty, relieved, or was he haunted by what happened?
We'll never know for sure. But But the green bicycle case, it continues to capture people's imagination even today. In Leicester, there's an annual bike ride that follows the route of Bella's last journey and visits key locations from the case.
That's pretty amazing that people are still so interested in this case after all this time.
And for decades, Light's actual green bicycle was on display in a local bike shop. It became kind of a macabre tourist attraction. In 1987, his bullets and holster were auctioned off for a lot of money.
So even the physical objects from the case have this kind of morbid fascination.
They do. And it just shows how much this case has resonated with people over the years. But the big question remains, was Ronald Light actually guilty of killing Bella Wright?
I mean, after everything we've talked about, it's still not clear, is it?
Not at all. Some people believe he was innocent. They point to the lack of a motive and the possibility of other explanations, like a stray bullet or even another person being involved. Others are convinced he did it. They argue that maybe the jury was swayed by the skilled defense or by social biases of the time.
It's hard to know for sure with so much uncertainty surrounding the evidence.
There's also that note supposedly written by the Leicester Police Superintendent Levi Boley. It claimed that Light confessed to killing Bella accidentally while he was waiting for his trial.
Oh, wow. So a deathbed confession of sorts?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But the problem is the authenticity of that note has been questioned by a lot of people. So we can't really take it as fact.
It just adds another layer of mystery to the whole thing, doesn't it?
It does. So we're left with these big unanswered questions. Was Ronald Light guilty? If he was, what was his motive? Was it a terrible accident like that note suggests? Or was someone else responsible for Bella's death?
And after more than 100 years, it seems like we may never know the full truth.
The green bicycle case. It's a powerful example of how difficult it can be to rely on circumstantial evidence, how a good lawyer can influence a jury, and how societal attitudes can impact the outcome of a trial. It really makes you think about how we determine guilt and innocence, and how much weight we should give to indirect evidence. It's a sobering reminder that even in the most high-profile cases, there can be a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes the truth remains elusive.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. And I have a feeling this case will continue to fascinate and puzzle people for many years to come.
I think you're right. So if you're interested in learning more about this case, I encourage you to do some research on your own. You might find some interesting theories and perspectives out there. And who knows, maybe you'll even come up with some of your own ideas about what really happened that night in 1919.